It's gotta be Kane. Now, don't get me wrong, I grew up watching the Attitude Era and I loved Kane when he made his big entrance. He had this mask and oh my god, Paul Bearer, all that good stuff. And a huge choke slam. And that's about it really, wasn't it? Like, it was awesome, but all he was hype. Like, I loved watching him rip the cage door off. I loved, you and I talked before we came in here about how kind of got a better tombstone than The Undertaker.
Yeah.
But like, beyond that, like, his in-ring work was about as disappointing as when he took his mask off and you were like, oh, is that it? Like, it was just, I don't know whether my opinion of him has been altered.
Sullied.
Yes. You know, and not just by corporate Kane, but by what the mayor of Knox County has gone on to become and endorse. But I was looking at this, the list that everyone else was sending in, and like, you know, there's some wrestlers right now that I maybe think aren't as good as some people perceive them to be, but I can understand why they have such hype and why such people love them. But like, I feel like if I was going to watch a Kane match now, like if we were at Mania, for example, and they were like, it's going to be a Kane match, unless it was against Chavo Guerrero, I'd go, I'll come for the fire to start, I'll nip to the bar, skip 10 minutes of kind of bland wrestling other than Kane coming off the top with his, you know, clothesline or whatever. I'll come back for the clothesline and the fire at the end, to be honest.
Yeah.
Beyond that, is there any other, like, is he really worth the hype? I love it as much as the next guy. But beyond that,
Wrestler or wrestlers? Because it's the Blackpool Combat Club.
Ooh.
I know, like, and that's you saying that, and I'm scared of like them coming for me. I can't say that individually about John Moxley. I can't say it about Claudio or Wheeler or Bryan Danielson or special guests Shibata or Matt Sydal or anyone else that is sort of associated to them in any way at the moment, because look at them all, their records, their resumes, as Alan Sugar would say, speak for themselves. But individually and together, I currently feel that they act most overexposed, shall we say, by wrestling's weekly churn. You just simply should not be allowed to get bored of John Moxley. That man did everything for all of us in the pandemic. That man did a great job as AEW World Champion in difficult times. He was often relied upon. The safety map for whenever everything else would happen in AEW was John Moxley. Amazing. Claudio, Wheeler, great wrestlers. And I don't mean that in the sort of almost derogative sense. Great wrestlers. Bryan Danielson, the uncrowned world champion, every single day he remains in AEW because he just would rather lose and have his fun than actually be the top guy. Incredibly admirable. All of these are admirable people with admirable skills, but I kind of don't want to see them again for like a year. I hear Wild Thing at the start of a Dynamite and I just think, oh, I just want to click off. I get why there's numbers so low. No, I've just seen it. I have seen it all. I have seen every version of The Brawl. I've seen every version of, in real life in some cases, privileged to be in Las Vegas for an Anarchy in the arena, and then at Wembley Stadium the same year for Stadium Stampede. I've gone on Blackpool Combat Club and I am full, and I don't sense I'm alone. I understand why you would rely upon an incredibly reliable act, but are they heels? Are they baby faces? Do they always have to win? You know, we've got the recent example of them going over FTR in that mini program to then not do the tournament for other reasons. Just lose once in a while. Like, we know you're the hardest, we know you're the funny, we know that your gym smells of piss, we know all these things about you. I just know too much at this point, and I cannot get excited the way that people, in some cases, seem to still get buzzed for them. I respect that, and I'm almost envious of that, because I want to feel the way I did in 2020, 2021 about John Moxley, and it feels like it's going to take 6 months to a year before I do. No more Wild Thing. I just absolutely no more.
Oh, goodness gracious me. Well, contrary to the belief of many people out there on the internet, I don't actually like burying things. I don't find it fun, I don't find it gratifying, and every single time it just sends an army of complete psychopaths after you, so it's really not worth it. So I'm going to try and remain balanced and say Jay White is just not for me. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't get the appeal of this gentleman. It started in New Japan when he came back from his excursion, and he was immediately shotted to the top, and he was immediately shotted as this main event prospect and everything else, and he was working these matches with Okada and Tanahashi, and he kind of grew into his role a little bit, to be fair. When he came back, he just had this scraggly beard, and he, like, you know, the little knife. He looked kind of like a knockoff Kenny Omega, and it was really strange. But you know, he started to grow in acclaim, and he was doing these 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 minute matches, and earning this rave acclaim from people all over the internet, people I respect and admire in the wrestling space. It just never really connected with me. I remember those eras of New Japan main events that ran about 50 minutes against the biggest and brightest, that would start off with this guy just rolling out of the ring and going, no, 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 and all these stalling and delaying tactics. It's just not for me. It's not what I like in my pro wrestling. And then he gets to AEW and he's just kind of a mid-card goofball. And, you know, there are people who will hold Jay White up as one of the best wrestlers in the world. I think that they are very entitled to their opinion, but opinions are nonsense, and they're wrong. So there you go.
Jay White? More like Jay Shite, am I right? That might be a bit harsh. But yeah, I don't get it. I don't know what it is about him. I've never ever got it through his New Japan days. Obviously he did loads in the main event, like massive matches with Okada and Tanahashi and everything else. All his heel run through the Bullet Club, taking it over. I never got it. Never ever once got it. I didn't get it on the mic. I don't really get it in the ring. I think his sort of slow-paced style, like with flurries of speed, was just kind of derivative of like just generic New Japan. He never stood out, especially in New Japan, because there were so many other people that were much more charismatic and interesting and better in the ring. And then the hype of him moving over to AEW, I was just like, I don't care. Like, no, he's never made me care about a Jay White match ever. And so it's one of those like intangible things, I guess. Obviously, other people will have different opinions, and some people will love Jay White, and no doubt he's some people's favorite wrestlers. But for me personally, I just don't get it. And like the funniest thing to me, but maybe not to anyone else, is just how quickly he's just become a generic mid-carder in AEW, because he's this massive like world heavyweight championship, like Wrestle Kingdom main eventing guy in New Japan, to just come over and be incredibly normalized and be in the Bang Bang Gang, whatever the goddamn hell that is, and just be so normalized and so mid-card. And it's like, well, that's kind of what I expected, not gonna lie. Sorry, Jay White, I just don't get you.
Now, I love this wrestler. I believe they're a legend. I love the comeback story. I love a lot of the stuff they did in the past. But currently, the person I believe does not deserve the hype in the wrestling business right now is Adam Copeland. I know, it pains me to say it, because again, I love Edge. I love a lot of the stuff, all of his slimy, villainous ways of old, and the comeback story just brought a tear to my eye. And every time I watch the 2020 Royal Rumble, I still get emotional. I just do. It was a hell of a moment. Love that. Love all that Edge. But the Edge that was hyped as coming over to AEW a few months ago was hyped as this game changer, this person that's going to kick off a bold new era in AEW and just going to be huge, make a hell of an impact. But really, in the months since that Wrestle Dream arrival, which was admittedly very surreal, just seeing Edge in that AEW environment was odd. It just was, in a good way. It was really odd. Since then, he's just become a part of the furniture, really, hasn't he? He's got locked into this never-ending feud with Christian. He's not done that much that's been really fascinating in terms of his character work. He's just been grizzled veteran. I'm going to take down all the bad guys and show you youngsters how it's done. Edge again, that he was sort of being in WWE, and it was a character that a lot of people were like, okay, it's fine, but we know there's more in you, Edge. We know there's a devious side. This rated R superstar that was billed as coming into AEW, we know he's in there, so give us a bit more of that. We've not had it. Sure, we've had a few interesting dream match scenarios with like him and Suzuki, and we need more of that. These completely odd and things that you just never expected to see in AEW. Adam Copeland against like a Kenny Omega and against like your Will Ospreays. All this weird stuff that you just never expected would be a possibility is now a possibility, and we've just not really seen it. So it's been a disappointment for me. It's been a bit of a disappointment. I know that Edge is clearly, Adam Copeland, is clearly having a good time. Like, he's working with his friends, and hopefully this all leads to potentially a Copeland and Christian tag team going forward, and they can both be just slime balls and be the devious heels of that tag team division. That's the kind of stuff that I want to see. I want to see this version of the Rated R superstar, not the grizzled Edge that's been a bit of a letdown and has not deserved any of the hype in my mind.
Well, I'm going to be nice about this and maybe a bit harsh at the same time. I simply do not get the appeal of Seth freaking Rollins in WWE. To me, and this is my personal opinion, he wrestles that sort of hybrid style in which he can do a bit of everything. He can fly, he'll do some delayed selling, bit of a melting pot of influences. I just cannot get on board with the idea that he's anywhere near as good as somebody else at that style, i.e. Kenny Omega, Konosuke Takeshita, Will Ospreay. I think that stuff just looks way more impactful. I think that they are just simply better. I think they could do more nuanced storytelling. But I'm going to be nice about Seth Rollins, okay? I am going to be nice, but it's kind of a bit harsh at the same time. I think Seth Rollins is quite clever. And what I mean by that is that he plays to an audience, right, that isn't necessarily inclined to watch a Kenny Omega or a Takeshita or an Ospreay. So he's found the niche of super work rate hybrid guy within WWE, and largely, in my opinion, that fan base doesn't understand the comparison. So as an analogy, he kind of takes something that's a bit more like hardcore, intense, physical, takes a sort of style of it, and that is WWE's Sum 41 / Avril Lavigne. He makes it more marketable, more palatable, but it's just not necessarily as good as anything else. And it's just weird. I don't necessarily understand how it works, because I understand if you're like a Randy Orton person, an Undertaker person, a Triple H person, someone who likes the slow build, the slow burn style. But if you like Seth Rollins, you should just like Kenny Omega. I just don't get it. He's Avril Lavigne.
I want to point out that I think all wrestlers deserve the hype, because it's a hard grind, right? So if somebody does want to go, oh my gosh, the best person ever, you may as well ride that wave. But in terms of me, when I was but a fetus growing up watching sports entertainment, and this is going to surprise some, I would imagine, because obviously I like big men slapping man meat, I never got my head around Lex Luger. Now, I think I know what this was. One, I was very much a WWF guy when I was a kid. So knowing that he came from WCW, I was probably like, no, I cannot possibly like you. But also, two, he was sort of the barrier, if that's the right word, to Bret Hart becoming the man. And I was such a big Bret Hart dude, once again, in my younger years, that, I mean, if my mum had got in the way, I'd have been like, Leslie, what are you doing? That we absolutely need to coronate Bret Hart here. So it probably just was the way that I was looking at it. And it's weird, right? It's just something that is, you can't explain it deep down in your tum-tum. Just some people you warm to, and some people you don't warm to. And when we were doing the Lex Express, and he was slamming Yokozuna on a boat, I was just like, this guy, as far as I'm concerned, is, I don't want to say he's not world champion material, because that's dumb, but the way he was being presented, and the way he was coming across to me through the television, that's how I felt. It's like, he cannot be the WWF champion. That doesn't make any sense to me. But when I grew up and I watched his WCW stuff, then I just think the way that they presented him was a lot better. And when you see him going against, not really going against, when he did go against Sting, you know, all the stuff with Sting and all the stuff with Ric Flair, etc. Then, and the Torture Rack as well was a cool move. I just think he was a much better fit for World Championship Wrestling than he was in WWF, and that could come down to the management as well, right? That could come down to the powers that be, because they were like, he's a body guy, looks like a bodybuilder. Obviously, he joined the WWF to be in the WBF before he came across as the narcissist, and that was issue two. He went from the narcissist to the all-American, I'm going to replace Hulk Hogan guy from nowhere. We just clicked our fingers and everything changed. So maybe somewhere deep down in my stupid brain, I just knew that there wasn't the right approach to try and get it done the way that we wanted to get done. And I probably felt like, you know, things were being forced down my throat more than I was ready for, right? So it's a Roman Reigns situation in 1994, whenever the hell it was. But I still think Lex Luger gets a bad rap by some people these days. Like I say, when you do go watch some of his world title wins in WCW and some of his classic matches, dude was so over, like was super duper over. And the tag team he had with Sting, when Luger was the bad guy, and Sting knew he was the bad guy, but he was his friend, I think it's probably one of the most relatable stories in history. Everyone has that one friend, you're like, oh man, he's an asshole, but you know, we hang out, so, you know, I just got to kind of put up with him a little bit, and then eventually, you get to the place you want to go. But yeah, Lex Luger. Obviously, Lex Luger, I'm sure will be on some people's, maybe not top 10, but top 20 lists. Whereas for me, it never really connected. It's all because I'd seen Bret Hart and I had fallen in love.
Which wrestler did not deserve the hype? Well, for me, it's not just one wrestler, it's two wrestlers. It's the Young Bucks. Yes, I can feel the comment section's wrath already, but hear me out on this one. Are the Bucks good? Yeah, they're good. But are they the main event attraction that some people hype them up as? For me, I just don't see it. I don't know. They're a decent tag team, clearly two incredibly athletic fellas, but I've never understood the level of hype that comes with Matt and Nick Jackson, or Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, I should say. The first time I saw them, that was back during the Generation Me days in TNA, and they were a fun, energetic, high-flying team that brought some excitement to things. But looking at where the Bucks are now, that some people will say they're the greatest tag team of all time, I don't know. For me, I don't understand that logic whatsoever. When you talk about the greatest teams ever, you think of the Road Warriors, you think of the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, the Hart Foundation, the Steiners, Harlem Heat, Arn and Tully, the Andersons, Hardys, Dudleys, Edge and Christian, Demolition, Bulldogs, Briscoes, Wild Samoans, Fabulous Ones, New Day, Usos. You get the idea. A decent team? Are they a decent team? Yes. One of the best of the modern era? Yeah, I guess they are. But their style, I don't know, and worst tendencies cause a bit of a disconnect with myself, depending on which teams we're in the ring with. Now, there are some Young Bucks matches that I think are great, but there's a lot that just don't do it for me. As someone who's very much that old man shouting at the clouds, I like to see, I don't know how to explain it, moves sold, rules adhered to, and not everything ever gets kicked out of. And unfortunately, I end up shaking my head quite a bit at some Young Bucks matches when the referee essentially just becomes totally redundant. Usually Rick Knox, of course, and barely anything sold, but wait, one of the Jacksons once sold a leg injury, so hey, there's that. People might point out the merchandise numbers that Bullet Club did in its heyday, and yes, those were huge numbers for a spell. But when you look at what made Bullet Club cool, it was Prince Devitt, it was Tama Tonga, later the Gorillas of Destiny, it was Carl Anderson, it was AJ Styles, it was Kenny Omega, it was Jeff Jarrett. Only joking, I do love you, Jeff. It was never really the Bucks, at least for me. Then you look at the creation of AEW and the founding EVPs. The biggest draw of the bunch was obviously Kenny Omega, rather than the Bucks or even Cody. This isn't me saying necessarily the Young Bucks are awful, but just me saying I don't get the huge hype that usually comes along with them. So, to quote Pete Dunne,